Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Saturday, December 17th, 2022, and oh boy, it has been quite a long time since I have uploaded. This is the first time in 5 years, or I guess not the first time, but the longest time in 5 years that I've gone without uploading for you guys in over 5 years now, and I do apologize for that. I was going through a very strenuous final exam period along with a transition into a role on campus dealing with the Institute of Politics here at Harvard, so a lot of things have really been thrown my way. As a result, I've sort of prioritized my academics and my extracurricular activities on campus above here. Unfortunately, it won't happen again. I can guarantee you that I will be committed to uploading from here on out. I really don't like taking leaves of absence from YouTube. The most I've ever gone, I think maybe it's just 3 to 4 days. So it definitely has felt like a big part of my life was really taken away. And it's entirely on myself. I apologize for that. There's a lot that has really happened. So I'm sort of playing catch up at this point. We missed the Georgia runoffs. We missed Krysten Sinema switching parties, which is the topic of this video because I do think that this party switch will be important as we head into 2024. But the Georgia runoffs probably won't be getting much attention. I think maybe 1 or 2 videos to talk about the results, to talk about the future implications for Georgia. But altogether, I think that we have really moved on from a lot of the content that we have missed, a lot of the discussions that needed to have been had. And I do apologize for that. So I know that you guys, at least some of you, are expecting in some ways of me uploading, and I totally understand that. I mean, I am supposed to be uploading at least once daily, right? I mean, I was doing 2 a day for a good portion of time. So I will say from here on out, I will dedicate myself to ensure that I am still uploading, maintaining that constant schedule, because I know that it is a bit disappointing sometimes when, people aren't uploading in the way that they normally do. And I have my frequent YouTubers. I wouldn't say I necessarily watch political YouTube. Definitely goes a little bit more into video games and things like that. But I definitely can tell you that on the flip side of things, I do also recognize how I have felt about YouTubers going in and out of upload schedules. So before we get into that, I just wanted to apologize for that. But let's go ahead and talk about Kyrsten Sinema for a moment. So her switching over to being an independent within the state of Arizona has been a very big move. I think a very smart one on her side. I will say that I think the analysis that has been given about this move to independent is one that really has taken me quite for a loop. I think some Democrats are really seeing this just as a formality, really not meaning much for Kyrsten Sinema. But what she has done effectively is save her reelection bid by stripping Democrats of the power of replacing her. Now, not everyone sees it this way. I think that there is a good portion of the Arizona Democratic Party that would full send a nominee against her in a three-way race against a Republican as well. But we know that from history, it does not bode well for candidates to be running against others who are ideologically similar when there is one stark contrast, one juxtaposition in the race for all of the candidates. And in the state of Arizona, it's going to be the Republican nominee for Senate in 2024. Kyrsten Sinema's move essentially took away, like I said, the Democratic Party's possibility of primarying her. And I think a lot of it had to do with the polling that was being done about the Democratic primary, a lot of the consideration that someone like Ruben Gallego or Greg Stanton, 2 U.S. representatives from Arizona, both more progressive than Kyrsten Sinema, who have floated the possibility at running against her in this primary. Running against her was one thing that was really seemingly terrifying to Kyrsten Sinema. I don't think she ever really recognized it nationally, but what we did know from polling is that Kyrsten Sinema was uniquely unpopular amongst Democrats, but exceptionally popular amongst Republicans. But the reason why that doesn't matter, over 90% of the time, she's still voting with President Biden, and no Republicans are going to choose her over their own nominee. At the end of the day, for the GOP, they'd rather have a Republican over Kyrsten Sinema, but Democrats also are very similar, but on the flip side, would rather have Kyrsten Sinema over a Republican. But like I said, the Democratic primary polling was not going well for Kyrsten Sinema by any stretch of the imagination. Her swing votes, her refusal to vote with the Democrats on the issue of the filibuster or to subvert standard Senate proceedings in order to codify Roe into law, codify gay marriage into law, whatever it might be, what we have found here from Kyrsten Sinema is that refusal and that pushback against national Democrats has caused voters, specifically on the Democratic side, to side against her. All of these polls showed her losing to literally any other name. You take the mayor of Phoenix, who is not a well-known statewide official, not a governor, senator, representative, just a mayor of Phoenix. And I don't mean that to diminish the role, but more so to say that the outreach that Kate Gallego would have would really be within the Phoenix metro area, right? You're talking about, yes, the population center of the entire state, but not necessarily to a point where I would say she's as well known by any standard as Mark Kelly, Krysten Sinema, Katie Hobbs, Carrie Lake, the whole rundown, right? And even against her, we have found that still you are going to find losses for Kyrsten Sinema, 60-25. Right, you take another person, Greg Stanton, another U.S. representative who is floating the possibility of running in this race, defeats Kyrsten Sinema 47-25. Recent polling done early 2022, or I guess a year ago nearly, but still relatively recent. We are still seeing large margins of victory for the potential Democrats running against her. So you know what she does? She decides, I'm not going to even explore the possibility of running as a Democrat. I'm going to run as an independent. And I know there has been also analysis as well coming out of this decision that, hey, Sinema's in it just for the one term. She's not going to run for re-election. Well, I can tell you one thing that we need to understand about members of Congress from the outside perspective: they rarely ever leave their seats. Kyrsten Sinema was in the House, then she was in the Senate, and now she has filed paperwork to officially run for Senate again. So we know that her intentions are to run for re-election. She has said, though, to the media that she hasn't thought about 2024, that it isn't really coming into consideration. But then again, Hillary Clinton said in 2013 that she wasn't going to run in 2016. So people don't exactly tell the truth to the media, not because they're trying to be deceitful or because they're trying to mislead anyone, but more so because I think there is a lot of pressure on incumbents to announce their re-election bids immediately. And I think a lot of the time there is still the general understanding, yes, Sinema probably is going to run. Yes, someone like Clinton is probably going to run, but that decision-making and the structure for that campaign needs to be fleshed out for us, and I think that's exactly what we're waiting to see from Kyrsten Sinema. So this move to run as an independent, she will be on the ballot, no doubt about that, in 2024. Now the question is, do Democrats run anyone? And you might be thinking, okay, so, well, first of all, let me explain why Democrats should, I think, from a political standpoint, should not run someone if they're focused on winning this race, because of party splitting, because of vote splitting, because of voters seeing Sinema and Gallego, or whoever it might be, as one and the same in terms of overall vote and policy. And then a stark contrast. And the issue here in Arizona is that it's not like Georgia. It's not like a state, or it's not like Maine, where there is ranked choice voting or an instant, or not instant, but a runoff system amongst the top two contenders. What happens in Arizona is whoever gets the plurality or majority of votes wins the election. That means we could see a very similar case as to what happened in the 2010 Senate race. This immediately came to mind when Sinema announced that she was going to be running or was going to be an independent. And I think what came to mind was this level of thinking between the Democrats and independents, or I guess the independent candidate, where Democrats refused to not run anyone. And in 2010, Marco Rubio, the only reason why he's in the U.S. Senate today is because the Democratic Party chose to run someone in this race. Now, you can also blame Charlie Crist, someone who eventually switched to the Democratic Party and ran as a Democrat in 2022, ran as an independent in 2010 to win the Senate race in Florida. At the time, he was an incumbent Republican governor who switched parties, decided, hey, I'm going to go for the Senate. And the interesting thing is that a lot of it has to do with drama that happened within the Republican Party. A lot of it has to do with a lot of similar things that we are seeing happening with Kyrsten Sinema. But the problem was, it doesn't matter that Charlie Crist was a Republican. Republican voters will always choose their own at the end of the day. Democratic voters, on the other hand, historically don't always make that decision. And I think what we found specifically in the 2010 Senate race is, though Charlie Crist, in more ways than one, was a Republican, at this point in time, he was not liberal, he was not a leftist, he was not a progressive by any stretch of the imagination. He was a hardcore conservative who simply switched as an independent to decide to vie for this bid. But what we know in hindsight is that Crist would have been better for Democrats than Rubio, obviously. The Democratic Party chose to run someone, and the vote split, but not between Republicans and Democrats. Between Republicans, between Rubio and Crist. The vote split between Crist and Meek. Meek being the Democratic nominee for Senate in 2010, a U.S. representative from Florida who got just 20% of the vote. But the gag of it all, the Democrats and the independent votes for Charlie Crist combined would have defeated Marco Rubio. Combined would have given either side Kryst or Meek, 49.9% of the vote, 1 percentage point more than what they needed to win. 49.9% as the combined vote share. But you see who got third place? The Democrats. You see who got first place? The Republicans, but the Republicans did not win a majority, which meant the majority of voters were not voting for Marco Rubio. But he still won. And this is exactly what might happen in 2024 when Democrats, should they decide to run a candidate against Krysten Sinema, because no matter what it seems, she's going to be in this race. Unless she explicitly declares that she is not running for re-election, she is in this race, and Democrats should treat it as such. And I know that amongst the Democrats, they are stressing, because I think, honestly, they would have preferred Sinema to run as a Democrat because they know they could have potentially primaried her. And what, you might be asking, okay, well, if she got primaried, can't she run as an independent? Well, there's these things called sore loser laws. And since 1970, under the Republican legislature, the state of Arizona has held a sore loser law. What does that mean? Essentially, as it's declared here by Ballotpedia, it's the fact is that some states bar candidates who sought but failed to secure the nomination of a political party from running as independents or as nominees for other parties in the general election. Essentially, if Sinema was to run in 2024 as a Democrat, lost to Ruben Gallego, she could not run as an independent in the general simply because of this law from decades ago. And it's something that I think Democrats were relying on because they felt maybe she would have tried to have been spiteful or tried to have been, sabotage-esque in a way towards the Democrats should she had lost the nomination. But there was a law in place preventing her from doing just that. So her course of action was separating herself from the party, and now as an independent, in terms of overall numbers, I mean, she's going to caucus as a Democrat, we know this, but as an independent, she will run and be on that ballot, and there is nothing the Democratic Party can do. Absolutely nothing they can do in terms of the primary process, in terms of the general election process, and what they might have to do is take a page out of the book from the Utah Democrats and support an independent candidate because there is a higher risk that a Republican wins the race. We know exactly how close these races are. Kyrsten Sinema's own first election was just 2.4%. In 2020, it was 2.4% again, and in 2022, it ended up being around 4 points. Victory for Kelly again. Victory for Sinema. Sure, Republicans lost these races, but think about the number that they're at, right? 48%, 49% in 2020, 47% in 2022. All it takes is just 3 to 4% of the expected vote total percentage that would have normally gone to Sinema or a Democrat as the Democratic nominee, splitting away, and the Republicans end up winning. Imagine it this way. Even if Sinema was on the ballot and Democrats decided to run someone, and Biden came down, Harris came down, Hobbs campaigned for the Democrat, and everyone made it clear, do not vote for Sinema, vote for the Democrat. Let her fade into irrelevancy. Imagine Democrats took that approach, and I'm telling you now it would not work because there would still be, based off of incumbency effect and based off the fact that there are still some Democrats who do very much support Sinema, she's still getting some support amongst the Democratic primary. There is just a narrow enough amount, 3 to 4% of the voters in total, probably amounts to being just less than 10% of the Arizona Democratic Party that would vote for Sinema, regardless of what party she's under, or at least as an independent who caucuses with the Democrats. They will see her as essentially a Democrat. She's also the incumbent, so she gets that bump as well. And what will happen is that the Democrats could very well get, in total, with Sinema and Gallego combined, 52% of the vote to the Republicans' 48%. But what happens is you take that 5% away from Gallego, he drops down to 47%. You have whichever Republican decides to run. Let's take the first one here, Mark Lamb, drop him up or bump him up to 48 where the Republicans were at, and Sinema gets 5%. Well, what happens here? The Democrats lose. Sinema loses, and the Republicans win. Sinema knows this is what's going to be the thinking of Democrats, that they don't want a repeat of 2010. There have been very few cases in the past where running as an independent or under a third party after losing a nomination or running ahead to preempt the loss in the nomination has worked, and realistically, it has happened in modern history once in 2006 with Senator Joe Lieberman, who still at the time was a Democrat, a registered Democrat who ran under a third party without affiliating for that third party, was defeated by Ned Lamont, now the governor of Connecticut, but at the time was the nominee for Senate, defeated Joe Lieberman, the incumbent, for his more conservative votes, defeated him in the primary, went into the general. Lieberman decided, hey, because I lost the primary, I'm still going to run. I still want to be on that ballot. Made it on the ballot, won the election, and the Republican got 9.8% of the vote, or 6% of the vote. You might be thinking, okay, why can't this happen in Arizona? Well, one, Connecticut is a solid blue state. It's not going to happen in Arizona. But number two, this Republican in specific had so many allegations against him, so many scandals that riddled his campaign. So many other Republicans threw their support to Joe Lieberman. So many Democrats did as well. And as a result, he ended up winning. But that's not going to be the case in 2024. It's a one-off situation, and we know typically what happens when circumstances such as this arise, and we know the consolidated vote will be for the GOP, and that Democrats will be split between Sinema and whichever nominee ends up being there. So the question is, do Democrats want this seat more, or do they want Sinema out more? Do they want to maintain Sinema's dominance and potential influence over the party? If that means preventing a Republican from winning the seat? Or are they willing to sabotage Sinema's campaign? Because if a Democrat runs, it also sabotages Sinema. It goes both ways. But it more so impacts the Democrats because, quite frankly, Sinema doesn't need this Senate seat. Democrats need it more. They need her more than she needs them. That's not to say that she has a political career beyond the Senate. Maybe she could run for president, maybe as a vice presidential nominee, whatever it might be. But I think, honestly speaking, Democrats have much more at stake. For Sinema, she's just a U.S. senator. She can return to politics in the future, but for the Democrats, this could be a seat that could determine national legislation losses. This could be a seat that determines failures to pass judicial nominees under a potential Biden second term. There is so much more at stake here for Democrats, and that's why I'm asking, that's why the question will be circulating over the next months, do we choose to run no one? Because in Utah, they did it, and what happened? Mike Lee still ended up winning, but only by 10. If they ran a candidate alongside Evan McMullin running, Mike Lee would have won by 30. And that's the question here. Now, it's different because Utah is a state that Romney won by nearly 50 points. Trump defeated Biden by double digits twice. So that was a red state. It wasn't one that was really, in the essence of the Democratic Party's idea of winning over states, redeemable or winnable. But in Arizona, as a swing state, it absolutely is, and maintains to be a state where Democrats can rely on victories if they put the effort in. But this has put them in a uniquely difficult position, and I think the only person who ultimately comes out on top after all of this is Kyrsten Sinema, and she knows it. This was the smartest political move we have seen going into 2024. Not Trump running, not DeSantis floating this bid, not Marco Rubio, not whatever it might be. Kyrsten Sinema has made an extremely powerful and smart move on her end. I'm not applauding her. I'm not attacking her. I'm not saying that I agree or disagree with this decision, but I am saying objectively, she has likely saved her re-election bid, and she knows it. There was no other reason for doing this besides the issue of electability, and quite frankly, she can play it off well by saying, I promise to be an independent vote, I promise to be an independent voice, now I will register as an independent. It works well, it sounds good, and overall, there aren't that many people who are going to look at this and say, I'm not, I think Democrats should run someone. I think, we will win this race. I think Sinema has put them in a very, very difficult position, and they're going to need to navigate it over the next 2 years if they want to maintain control of the U.S. Senate, because in 2024, they have a lot more up than just Arizona. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Again, I apologize for really checking out during a very stressful time period of my life. And I don't say that because I think that, I've gone through more stressful time periods than the one I'm describing. So really, I don't have much of an excuse. I just offer the explanation that I have. I do apologize for that. I will maintain my upload schedule over the next future. Not putting a timestamp on it. I really, really do want to make sure that I am actually following through with the promises that I make, with the content schedule that I put out for myself. And I do apologize that I took such a long hiatus from this channel, but I'm glad to be back. It was great recording this video. I had so much fun doing it, and I can't wait to see you guys in the next one. So again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all tomorrow.